Excuse me. So next up, we're going to learn about an even older project that's been cleaned up, the Beatson Mine Remediation project on Latouche Island. Fascinating bit of history in Prince William Sound that mining was such a big deal here back in the early 1900s and later. So I have Jeff Lachowski, asset manager for Rio Tinto, and I believe Lucy Pitto, communities and social performance specialist at Rio Tinto. Welcome.
Okay. Yigali Do. My name is Lucy Pitto. I'm Kenaitze Indian. I am the Community and Social Performance Specialist for Rio Tinto closure in the Americas, and I want to start with a land acknowledgement that we actually worked in collaboration with the Chiniga village to create. Latouche Island and the surrounding land and waters of the Chugach region are the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Supiaq people, including the Chiniga, Valdez, Titlik, and Eyak tribes. We acknowledge and honor the ancestors, elders, and current generations of these tribal nations who have cared for these lands, waters, and wildlife from time immemorial. We recognize that the historic Beatson Mine is here because of the sacrifices forced upon the Supiaq people. Our goal is to integrate their history and traditional knowledge with our efforts to remedy the impacts caused by historical mining. Okay. So we're here today to talk about the history and cleanup of the Beatson Mine Site on Latouche Island. We will give an overview of existing conditions and information on recent studies we've performed to understand the extent of metals contamination from historic mining waste rock material. We've now submitted a site cleanup plan to DEC while considering feedback from all of our stakeholders that we work with. The planned cleanup will result in significant improvements to the environment. So this presentation will provide Prince William Sound members, anyone who's here today or joining us online, with information that will support future public comment periods held by DEC or other permitting agencies as part of the regulatory process. So I'll now turn it to Jeff Lachowski to run through this presentation.
Thanks, Lucy. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with the Stewardship Foundation and give you an update on our project. So as indicated, my name is Jeff Lachowski. I'm an asset manager with Rio Tinto Closure. So our job within the closure team is we are tasked with three main goals. One of them is to prepare our open mines to close and how to plan accordingly to close appropriately. Second one is to actually close mines once they shut down production. And the third, where I fit in and the Beatson project, is we manage legacy mine sites through the remediation project with multiple goals of trying to optimize value with environmental benefits, community, community uplifts, whatever we can do to better use that land after mining is completed, and obviously take care of the environmental damages that have occurred. So we'll jump into it here. The Beatson Mine project, the main purpose here is to manage and control sources of contamination from historic mining, which are leaching metals into surface water, groundwater, and the environment. So since the Beatson Mine has sat for many, many decades, these mining materials have just been leaching and exposed to the elements and spreading around. So our goal is to understand what's going on and come up with a remedial plan and then implement that to leave conditions in a much improved state. So in 1989, Manaska was a subsidiary of Rio Tinto. We acquired, Manaska acquired the mineral estate of the former Beatson Mine. And Rio Tinto then acquired Manaska through a 1989 acquisition of the Kennecott copper companies. So Rio Tinto never operated at the Beatson Mine Site. We are just now looking at improving the conditions from the legacy mine impacts. So in 2014, the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation became aware of contamination on Latouche Island and contacted landowners. That's where Rio Tinto, as well as other property landowners, received a letter saying you are a potential responsible party for this contamination. So here's just a map to give you the location of where we are. You can see Latouche Island is, the Beatson Mine is on the northwest corner portion of Latouche Island. Closest town is Chiniga, about 3 miles across the Latouche Strait, I believe it's called. So stepping back to the history, pretty cool photo on the top right. You can see a pretty well-developed town and facilities. So there was over 3,000 people who lived on Latouche during the heyday of mining. And so this occurred between 1899 and 1930. So quite some time ago. There were actually 3 different mines, the Blackbird, Beatson, and Chiniga mines within the vicinity of the project. So mining ended in 1930. Things were pretty much left. You know, the miners moved on at the time. In 1964, everybody's aware of the 9.2 earthquake, which lifted the island actually by 10 feet, and the tsunami impacted the facilities there quite a bit. Then also in the 60s, the surface estate was sold to a land developer. And so the remaining structures were demolished, and this land development basically came in and subdivided the mine site and sold to potential, recreational cabin owners. During this time, interestingly enough, they used the waste rock to build roads throughout the subdivision. So that was unfortunate because it was taking the material that was leaching metals and spread it around the site. So as I mentioned before, in 1989, Rio Tinto became responsible through acquisitions. So we began investigating the contamination and understanding the extent about 2016. So here's an overview of the mine site and the area. So you can see the Latouche Passage. There's a few of the facilities. You can see the tram dump waste rock pile. There's also what's called the Blackbird waste rock pile. These are waste rock that was pulled out of the mine and then piled up, essentially. We've also got a variety of debris piles, and then those roads I mentioned that were constructed using some of the mine waste material. So here's a few more photos. On the right, you can see debris piles. A lot of, you can imagine if things were just destroyed and demolished in place and just left. There's metal, there's wood, a variety of things, and then the large waste rock piles, which are a significant component of our cleanup plan. In addition, you have a bunch of mine infrastructure, actual openings and adits that we're trying to mitigate to make them safer so they're not a hazard for anybody who may encounter them. The left side is a former 1 million gallon oil tank. So we currently have, with DEC, a draft site cleanup plan. So we went out and characterized, did a bunch of sampling and monitoring work to understand where the contamination exists at the site. And then we looked at what are the alternatives to mitigate and remediate this environmental conditions. So we've come up with a preferred alternative after our assessments, and I'll list through kind of the main components of that. And this is what is composed in the site cleanup plan that is now with DEC, and we're working with them on approval and next steps. So primarily, we hope to consolidate and manage the waste rock. There's also tailings. There is some creek sediment that is waste rock and other mining impacted materials. The petroleum hydrocarbons from the tank that we saw. And so we hope to consolidate this material into a couple repositories on site. And the purpose of the repositories will be to exclude and kind of shelter those materials from precipitation and water, essentially locking it up so the metals are no longer mobilized into the environment. In addition, we will have some areas where we place a cover over the top of mining impacted materials to be protective, and we will close mine openings to improve the safety. And then once the work is complete, we will restore and revegetate the areas of impact. So obviously there's going to be multiple benefits to this. These mining impacted materials have been mobilizing into the environment for almost 100 years now, so we hope to reduce that and eliminate that and allow restoration to occur after. So we're going to see an ecological lift to the wetlands, the water bodies, the watersheds in the area. There should be improvements on the aesthetics, the visual, that the debris will be managed accordingly. And we are working with the landowners out there on Latouche Island and the regional stakeholders as we've been working to come up with our plan. So as part of the site cleanup plan, there would be long-term monitoring that will make sure everything's working and keep tabs on the water quality and the conditions on site. So this is pretty small, but just a general timeline. So you can see we've got quite a few years of investigating and coming up with our remedial alternative. You can see the star where we are. That's 2025, where we had selected a preferred alternative and submitted a draft site cleanup plan to DEC. And so we basically are in the next phase of refining that alternative, the preferred alternative, where we're doing additional data collection to refine the engineering design, understand our costs before we get final approval on the site cleanup plan, and then work towards implementation. And so our execution, once we have final approval, is probably over 3 seasons. We're all familiar with the short field season up here, so we would be using 3 field seasons to execute the plan. And so where we are now, as I mentioned, the draft site cleanup plan is in DEC's hands. There will be a public comment period associated with alternative cleanup levels, probably coming later this year. And we will actually need to obtain landowner consent where there would be any institutional covenants or restrictions based on, after the cleanup on, for instance, non-residential use. We're aiming for a commercial alternative cleanup level, which would basically preclude, residential use of the property, but it would be safe for recreational and/or commercial use. So we're assessing, ultimate land use stewardship and working through that process. And I will hand back over to Lucy to talk more about that stakeholder engagement.
Thank you. So I'm excited to share the work that we're doing in partnership with our neighboring communities, focusing on responsible development and long-term impact. So we prioritize clear, ongoing communication with our closest neighbors and landowners on the island, private property owners and Chiniga Village especially, by providing things like biannual newsletters, keeping them informed. We want to ensure that everybody has a direct line to us and that all voices are heard. So to guide our efforts, we completed a social impact assessment in 2023 that I believe was presented last year. And that helped us understand the broader impacts of our project, so as to make informed, responsible decisions every step of the way. We've also committed to hands-on engagement. So, for example, we're partnering with Alaska Resource Education to host an educational site visit for the youth at Chiniga Village. So this will give them a firsthand look at mining and remediation processes to help foster understanding and inspire future leaders in the field, hopefully. So local investment is another key priority. We're working with local contractors and Alaska businesses to support the remediation project, ensuring that the community benefits directly from this work. Above all, we're dedicated to leaving a positive legacy. Our goal is to set a responsible example for future mining projects, balancing progress with environmental care and respect for the people here. So we do want to play a video if we have time.
Latouche Island and the surrounding land and waters of the Chugach region are the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Sukpiat people. We acknowledge and honor the ancestors, elders, and current generations who have cared for these lands, waters, and wildlife from time immemorial. We recognize that the Beatson mine is here because of the sacrifices forced upon the Sukpiat people. We commit to integrating their traditional knowledge with our efforts to remedy the impacts caused by historical mining. Since 2016, Rio Tinto has been studying how past mining operations at the Beatson Mine Site on Latouche Island, Prince William Sound, Alaska, have affected the surrounding environment. The Beatson Mine Site, located on traditional Sukpiat land, includes 3 former underground copper mines, Blackbird, Chiniga, and Beatson. These mines were in production between 1899 and 1930 by Kennecott Copper Corporation. The surface interests were sold to a developer in the 1960s, well after mine operations had ended at the site, which Rio Tinto never operated. Waste rock, tailings, and debris from mining operations have been left on site for nearly 100 years. Additionally, a historical flume or human-made elevated trough reached across the beach area and disposed mine tailings downslope into the water. Developers in the 1970s also used the contaminated waste rock as road-based material, spreading metals contamination farther across the site. The waste rock piles and surrounding soils are a source of metals contamination to the site and are mixed with historic mining debris. These metals leach into groundwater and surface water bodies on site, along with the naturally occurring high levels of arsenic.
Water bodies at the site include creeks, a feature known as Mine Lake, which is fed by Copper Creek, and a number of constructed ponds located within the historic mine footprint. Another area of the site was historically used to store heavy oil. This area of the site contains old, weathered hydrocarbons in the soil, but they do not affect the surface or groundwater. Site underground mine openings, referred to as adits, are also present at the site. The main openings include the Beatson Main Adit, the Main Adit South, the Beach Portal, and the Chiniga North Adit. These openings also convey contaminated drainage from groundwater and surface water. We're developing a cleanup plan to remediate the site and improve the environmental conditions. This cleanup project, led by Rio Tinto, is based on extensive studies to make sure we're safely addressing past contamination caused by the former operator and preventing any ongoing impact. As part of the cleanup, waste rock, debris, and hydrocarbon-impacted soils, as well as tailings that spilled onto the beach, will be consolidated into 2 engineered repositories to prevent metal leaching and to control the primary sources of contamination on site. The process that we use to build the repositories will apply to both locations and would follow these steps. We first undertake the earthworks to create the repository, which involves sourcing material from borrow areas. We then lay the subbase and then place the waste rock into the repository. We then sequentially add the protective soil, geomembrane, geocomposite drainage layer, general fill soil, and vegetation soil, and undertake a revegetation program. As part of the Beatson cleanup, we will also put controls in place to ensure the submarine tailings remain stable and undisturbed. We will restore and vegetate areas of the site where cleanup actions, like excavation and removal of waste rock from streams, occurred, and plan to work with native stakeholders to inform species for revegetation plantings. Consolidating the contaminated material in repositories will control the source of contamination and result in improvements of environmental conditions and increased protection of human health.
Okay, again, we appreciate the opportunity to share our story here. If there's any questions, we've got quite a few of us from the team. We're actually going to be out at site the next couple of days, so plenty of people to discuss if you want to catch up with us after or anything now.
Thank you for the presentation. I understand that Rio Tinto a few years ago tried to buy out the private lot owners out there so that you would have more control over the site cleanup operations. So I'm wondering how many remaining private lot holders there are and whether or not you've approached them about having institutional controls on their properties, or will you end up having to clean up to residential use for those remaining private lots?
Yeah, fantastic question. That is right in the heart of what we're doing right now. There are multiple landowners that remain even after our acquisition campaign. So we have active engagement going on with them, letting them know what our plans are. And literally the next few months we'll be addressing and discussing the potential for institutional controls on their property and working with them to find solutions. Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, that history down there is super interesting of mining and out in the sound.